In the last video, I sculpted SavannahXYZ in my own style, and in this video, actually, do you know what? Before we get into that, let me just address a comment that I got on Twitter about this model suggesting that I was giving off thirsty creep vibes. Listen, I like Savannah's content. That's all there is to it. I think it's really funny. I think it's boldly niche, and it's a reminder that we don't need to be taking this 3D stuff seriously all the time. So please stop making it weird. There's nothing weird going on here, okay? Anyway, in this video, we're gonna print a life-size version of Savannah. No, I'm joking. It's not gonna be life-size, but it is gonna be bigger than anything that I've printed before. So let me explain why. A few weeks ago, a company that makes 3D printers called Creality got in touch and asked if I wanted to try out the CR-10 SE 3D printer. Now, in case you're not familiar with 3D printing, there are two main approaches to be aware of. There's resin printing and FDM. Now, resin printers are generally much higher resolution, which makes them ideal for printing detailed character models, but the materials are generally quite brittle, which means that they break easily. Whereas FDM printers are generally lower resolution, but with stronger materials, making them ideal for printing things that you use rather than things that you look at. Now, the CR-10 SE is an FDM printer, which I've never really used, so when Creality offered to send it to me, I suggested that maybe it would be a better idea to send one of the resin printers, and they said, nah, you'll be fine. What's your address? I was like, I'm not really sure it's a good idea, to be honest. So this is the Creality CR-10 SE. I haven't opened it yet, obviously. So let's do that first, and then I'll talk about why I want to print this as big as possible. So we've got some tools, a couple of spanners, Allen keys, a little screwdriver, a few screws, and then instruction manuals. We have got filament, plug socket, that isn't a UK plug. I have no idea what that's for. Maybe it's for cleaning the nozzle out, perhaps. Some sort of bracket. Looks like I'm gonna have to put this thing together. A screen. Oh, that's quite heavy that actually. So that's, well, I've no idea. I'm gonna be honest, I don't really know how these things are put together. Oh, okay, so that's the rest of the printer. I then got to work putting the printer together, which wasn't too difficult actually. For someone with absolutely no experience with this, it took less time than it takes to put together a set of Alex drawers from IKEA. Probably took about 40 minutes. If you're experienced though, this could be, I don't know, maybe a 15-minute job. Now, before we get to printing the Savannah model, I thought it would be a good idea to, just do some test prints first, just to check that everything's working. So I downloaded the Benchy model because, well, I don't know why, because everyone else does it. But as a little test for me, I also got hold of the Rook model that I printed when I got my resin printer, because I figured it could be quite interesting to compare the results from this printer compared to a resin printer. Now, you will see me using my pen drive here to transfer the files, but what I realised later is that you can just send the files over your network, which was really convenient. And another really convenient feature of this printer is auto bed leveling. Now, as I say, I can only speak for resin printers, but bed leveling can be a pain in the ass. So to have the printer just do it automatically is really nice. And so these are the results from that initial test print. This is the Benchy model. It turned out really nice actually. I'm quite impressed with it. I mean, I've nothing to compare it to because I've not printed it in resin. I've never printed this model before, but it looks pretty decent. You can see some layer lines on it as to be expected, but they're really not that visible. I was pretty impressed by this, to be honest. And then the Rook model, equally as impressed. Like, it's not done as good as a job as the resin printer, which is to be expected, but the writing on the front is a lot more readable than I thought it might be. The writing on the top, it's not done the greatest job of, to be honest, and then there's the little spiral in the middle which has come apart slightly, but overall I'm impressed by how well it did. I was expecting it not to do quite as well. So this has built my confidence that printing Savannah with this printer is actually going to turn out quite nice. Now, as I said at the start of the video, I do want to print Savannah quite big, and the reason for that is resolution. Now, if you think about TVs, the resolution of a TV is determined beforehand. In other words, the maximum number of pixels on that TV is determined beforehand. So if you have an HD TV, you're working with a resolution of 1920 pixels across and 1080 pixels down. And the bigger the TV is, the more these pixels need to stretch and the worse the image looks. 3D printing resolution works slightly differently because rather than determining how many pixels are in the end result beforehand, we determine how big the pixel is, or voxel as it is in 3D. So in other words, the bigger we make the print, the more pixels are needed, which means a higher resolution. I hope that makes sense. After preparing the model for print in Zbrush, it was time to slice the model. To keep things simple, I intended to just use auto supports, but for some reason the Creality slicer added a crazy number of supports. Now, I tried Cura, which is a different slicing app as well, but I wasn't keen on the interface, and I was put off when I realised that my printer wasn't there by default. In the end, I paid for Lychee filament, mainly because I was already familiar with the interface from resin printing. Now, I did have to set up the printer manually because, again, it wasn't on there. I guess maybe this printer's too new, but I think Lychee makes this quite easy for you to do. Now, printing this model quite big is going to take a long time to print, so I decided to print it small first just to see if it worked okay, and this is the result. It's definitely not as clean as a resin printed model, but I think it's worked reasonably well, to be honest. It's again surpassed my expectations. I did make a few mistakes with it. I can't actually find the hands now for some reason. I don't know where I've put them, but the supports on the shoes, they're so thick that it's really hard to actually get the shoes off. So I've just kind of left them on there. And I also had an issue with the cube. I thought that there was something wrong with the printer at first because this is kind of warped and looks a bit weird, and I did wonder if I'd done something wrong and it had warped on the print. But when I checked it in Lychee later on, I'd actually just scaled it on one axis, which is why it looks a little bit weird, but that's fine. I can sort that out for when I print it big. And yeah, I don't know, yeah, it's all right. I didn't glue it together or anything, so it is just still in pieces. But yeah, I'm quite impressed. I think once we print it big, it should be a lot better because, as I said, when we print bigger, we should have more resolution. But before we do get to printing it big, I've got to say that I am glossing over a lot of headache that I've had over the past couple of weeks trying to get this to work. Now, I've had a lot of failed prints. I've been frustrated a lot with software, especially with the supports. For some reason, with FDM slicing apps, they don't let you export the supports after you've created them, which would have prevented a lot of headaches, but whatever. But to be honest, I'm not gonna go too deeply into these issues that I've had because I don't know how much of that is just down to me being a noob to FDM printing. Probably most of it. That being said, I definitely ran into a problem which I don't think has anything to do with being inexperienced. So I have just come in here and seen this. I just found this on the build plate. This is a little screw, which I'm assuming is, yeah, that thing is wobbling like mad. Something's not right. So I'm gonna have to stop this, which is a shame because this is the first time that this piece has actually been printing properly. I'm just going to pause that and hope I can find where this little screw is supposed to go, because this isn't right. I did manage to fix this, but it was a royal pain in the ass. That being said, I did manage to print all of the pieces eventually, and this is the result. And it's okay. It's not quite as good as I was hoping for, if I'm being completely honest. I did have to Dremel quite a bit to get the pieces to fit together, and to be honest, it's the first time I've used this tool, so I didn't do the best job. The cube, so when I printed the cube, this is the first piece that I printed, and the supports were so strong that I couldn't actually get them off properly in quite a few different places. Now, after printing the cube, I did figure out that I could make the supports a little bit weaker while still being strong enough to hold the print up. It just meant that it made taking them off a lot easier. And I think overall, this piece just does need a little bit more time to finish, you know, sanding down and smoothing things out and getting pieces to fit together a bit better. But I just don't have time to do that, to be honest. Now, I could potentially print this at a lower layer height, which would essentially increase the resolution by quite a lot and would give a much nicer finish. But the print time on that would be huge, and I just wouldn't be able to fit it in before I need to upload this video. But maybe that's something that I can try in future. But I think moving forwards, I probably will just stick to resin for printing characters. But I think it's worth remembering that FDM printers aren't really intended for precision jobs like printing figures. I can definitely see me using this printer for printing other more practical things with less intricate details. So with that being said, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.